Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, People, the Heart of the Energy Transition. My name is Andrea Glass, and I'm the Head of Regional Skills Planning and Enabling Sectors at Skills Development Scotland, the national skills agency supporting the people and businesses of Scotland to develop and apply their skills. People are indeed central to that energy transition, and alongside the Scottish Government's Climate Change Plan update, December 2020 saw the publication of the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan, led by Skills Development Scotland and developed with key partners and industry, which identified 6 key skills priorities around supporting a green labour market recovery from COVID-19, around building a better understanding of our future skills needs, developing the workforce for the future for the transition to net zero, around driving awareness and action to support upskilling and reskilling, ensuring fairness and inclusion as part of a just transition, and critically, and I think something we'll be hearing quite a lot of this afternoon, taking a collaborative approach. To support the transition to net zero, new skills will be needed for emerging job opportunities. Enhanced skills and competencies will be required for some jobs, and there may be a need for existing jobs in greater numbers. We heard in the first session about the new technologies generating the solutions to solve global problems, but managing the human side of our energy transition is just as important as the technology. Economic ambition and investment needs to be matched by a similar commitment to skills and workforce development. This session is going to focus on the skills synergies between both renewables and legacy energy sectors, as well as unravelling the direct link between project pipelines and the rate at which we can transition our human capital. In this session, we'll be welcoming 3 speakers who I will introduce you to, each ahead of their presentations. I don't want to steal their thunder, but you'll hear about work that's already going on to assess skills demand for energy transition. You'll hear about some of the wider opportunities on offer as a sector through delivering high-quality human capital into a market where net zero is on every industry's to-do list, and the experience of other sectors that may help to smooth out demand for the people we'll need to make that shift to a low-carbon energy future. All of our speakers are expert in their field and will each take approximately 10 minutes for their presentation, after which there'll be an opportunity for a question and answer. As in the first session, we'll encourage you to use that Slido tab to pose any questions you might have, and I'm sure you're all expert at using that now. Nick Sharp, Director of Communications and Strategy at Scottish Renewables, will also be keeping an eye on questions as they come in, and will pose a selection of these during the Q&A, which will follow on from that third and final presentation. So I think it's fair to say we've got some really interesting topics and presentations to hear. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Claire Foster. Claire is Head of Clean Energy at Shepherd and Wedderburn and also leads their project finance practice. She's been involved in the energy sector since the early renewable projects of the mid-1990s, working on projects right across the UK energy sector. So that's including onshore and offshore and floating wind, biomass, energy efficiency, tidal, hydro, small-scale renewables and heat. And she's also a member of the Edinburgh Climate Commission and on the board of Renewable UK. So without any further ado, Claire, I'd like to hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for the kind introduction and the opportunity to speak today. I think my job really is to try and set the scene and try and give you an idea of the scale of opportunity that is out there. I've been amazed at the amount of change and the rapidity of change over the last 12 months, even in terms of the UK landscape and the appetite for transitioning to net zero. So if I can go back a bit, you'll be aware that legislation was enacted in Scotland to achieve net zero by 2045, and the UK legislative target is 2050. Now, I'll throw into the mix at this point the fact that Edinburgh, Glasgow, and in fact London set more ambitious targets for carbon neutrality or net zero, depending on which city you're talking about, by 2030. That's 9 years from now, and it's an enormous challenge. But those targets that we're talking about now have renewed importance, given that we're looking at them through the lens of COVID-19. I've been working at home since March last year, and it's been remarkable to see the difference in everyone's lives, how we're working, how we're buying, how we're traveling, and how we're actually interacting with one another. It's completely different. But in addition to that, the catastrophic socio-economic effects of COVID-19 means that there is a new impetus to make sure that the recovery is done in a just and equitable and sustainable manner. Now, there's clear commitment from Westminster to do this. One need only look back to November 2020 when Boris came out with his 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. In that document, you'll see that there's reference to mobilising £12 billion of public and 3 times that amount, £36 billion of private sector investment, with the aim of providing 250,000 jobs. No mean feat. Holyrood has similarly given its commitment to a green recovery, and we're going to talk about some of the things that have been mentioned both by Westminster and by Holyrood in terms of the documents that they've come out with recently. But I think the point that I need to make here is that it's very easy to look at the green recovery and say, well, actually, that's the job of those like me working in the clean energy sector. They'll sort it. But actually, it's not just the clean energy sector. If COVID-19 has done nothing else, it has made people realise that every part of the economy, all sectors, all people actually have to come together to make a difference and try to get to a position where we decarbonise our lives and the economy and life as we know it. Now, within that, there's an enormous opportunity across all of the sectors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that now. So what I've got up on screen, and apologies, I know the text is very small, and I'm not going to read through all of it, but this was the BEIS White Paper that came out in December last year. And within that, it talks about a net zero future. These boxes on the right-hand side are the additional papers that are due to come out from government over the coming months. So whilst this paper talks about a number of different things, it's not the end of the story. There will be additional papers about electricity system analysis, nuclear, the fact that we need to talk about grid, the fact that we need to talk about interconnectors, the fact that we need to decarbonise buildings and transport. And so one of the things worth mentioning in the context of the white paper is this box on the left here, where it talks about the different composition of emissions and where they're concentrated. Transport is the biggest emitter at the moment. That's the one where we need to get diesel and petrol cars off the roads at the moment. But the BEIS White Paper doesn't actually talk about transport decarbonisation, and that paper is due out in spring this year. It also mentions buildings, and buildings are a big issue, both public buildings, residential and commercial, where the concentration of emissions is enormous. And we need to think about that, particularly in the context of cities like Edinburgh, where I live, where it's a UNESCO heritage site. We can't just tear down buildings and put up sustainable ones in their place. There have to be different solutions to things. So the BEIS White Paper talks about power. As you would imagine, that's in the context of generation, whether that be offshore wind, onshore wind, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage. Talks about energy systems, buildings, industrial energy. We've got an enormous job in terms of decarbonising industry and actually moving to a net zero future. And the oil and gas sector is also forming its own chapter within the BEIS White Paper. The OGA is obviously liaising with the oil and gas sector at the moment about how we actually tackle that problem in the North Sea, which obviously is very carbon intensive. So I'm not going to dwell on many of these other than to mention the fact that we've got reference to offshore wind. Target is 40 gigawatts by 2030. When you think about that, that's quadrupling where we are at the moment. There's a huge amount to do. You'll be aware that round 4 has just closed down south with some interesting results. And we're going through the Scotland process north of the border at the moment. So there's an awful lot of activity in the offshore wind sector. Onshore wind's an interesting technology in itself, having been excluded from the CFD since 2015. It's now back at the table. But in terms of onshore wind, we're talking about, if you look at the Committee on Climate Change report, numbers that are referenced, an increase to 35 gigawatts by 2035. That's less than 15 years' time. That's tripling what we have in terms of installed capacity at the moment. Think about that in the context of jobs. Other areas mentioned by the white paper: carbon capture and storage, battery storage, nuclear, and a planning system that has to try and facilitate all of these things happening. I mention buildings, and deliberately so, because when you think about the built environment across the UK, that is an enormous challenge in itself. We know that the EPC rating on a lot of buildings isn't where it needs to be. There's an awful lot of issues in terms of sections of society which are living in accommodation that, quite frankly, isn't fit for purpose. And there's an intention to try and tackle all of that, to make these buildings wind, watertight, and energy efficient so that people have a better standard of living. That in itself is an enormous job to try and tackle right across the UK. The BEIS paper also talks about clean heat technologies, the end of gas grid connections, and you will have seen in the press that going forward, we're not going to have gas central heating boilers. We're going to get rid of all of those. That is a huge undertaking when you think that pretty much every house in the UK has a gas central heating system. And that's ignoring the industrial sector and other parts of the economy that have buildings in place. Now, the BEIS White Paper mentions upskilling strategies and mentions a Green Jobs Task Force and National Skills Fund. So there's an awful lot of emphasis on making sustainable transitions and bringing jobs with it. The last thing that I'm going to mention, just in the context of the White Paper, is storage and flexibility. We know that in turning the system round so that we're moving away from gas and we're moving away from coal and we're moving away from oil, but storage is going to be essential because of the intermittency of certain of the renewables technology. We also need to look at the network. Grid connection is currently not fit for purpose. The grid was built over 100 years ago at a time where the amount of electricity going across the wires is a fraction of what it is now. And when you think about this in the context of decarbonisation of transport and all the new electric vehicles coming onto the road and the decarbonisation of heat, there's going to be a requirement for the electricity going across those wires to go up exponentially. So the grid needs to be enhanced enormously. There are also focuses on the new technologies that are coming through. Carbon capture and storage is a big one, and clean hydrogen seems to be a buzzword in the industry at the moment. We're not quite there yet. There's an awful lot of work going on at the moment, but hydrogen has been looked at as a potential for decarbonisation of transport and other things. So there will be an awful lot of investment and an awful lot of work being done in relation to that. So that was the BEIS White Paper that came out in December. 48 hours later, Scottish Government came out with its climate change plan, and it was a revised document covering the period from 2018 to 2032, 255 pages if anyone's interested in reading it, and those are the 8 chapters. Now you will see the level of overlap between what Scottish Government are saying and what UK BEIS are saying. There's an awful lot of synergy there. The language is similar, but not quite identical to that used by UK government. But ultimately, the commitment is to a green recovery and a just transition to net zero. There are key themes within this document talking about the role of public and private investment in delivering net zero. There is reference to offshore wind, to onshore wind, to hydrogen plan, to new build net zero emissions from heat standards due to be introduced in 2024, where all new buildings will have to have zero emissions heating systems. There's the phase out of petrol and diesel cars and vans up here by 2030, and an intention to decarbonise rail by 2035. Enormous challenges. So how do we get there? And the key word in all of this is collaboration, because if we don't collaborate, not only within the clean energy sector, but actually across all of the sectors, we're never going to get there. We have to work together to deliver this sustainable economy and net zero future that we're targeting. Now, we've got an opportunity. When you look back 200 years ago to the Industrial Revolution, the UK led the way. And Scotland, certainly in terms of the last 30 years, has led the way from an energy perspective. We are rich in natural resources. We are very windy and very rainy. And so we can do lots of things and have been at the cutting edge of the clean energy sector. But it doesn't stop there. This is about every sector helping to push forward and move the dial on decarbonisation. But how do we collaborate? We need private and public sector to come together. And I guess I would just leave you with an example of what we've done in Edinburgh recently. It was mentioned at the outset that I'm a member of the Edinburgh Climate Commission, which was an organisation established between City of Edinburgh Council and Edinburgh University. And the intention of that commission was to bring together people from public and private sector and third sector to talk about the challenges that Edinburgh was facing as a capital city in achieving net zero by 2030. One of our work streams was to establish a forum, a platform for collaboration between public and private sector. And we developed what's known as the Edinburgh Climate Compact, which is a document, that's a copy of the front page on the right-hand side there, intended to promote and celebrate ambitious Edinburgh business and public sector action to achieve net zero. We mobilised that within the space of 2 months. From drafting the original document to getting 6 signatories on board on the 18th of December, and they're listed there. You can see we've got financial sector, construction sector, education sector, health sector, public sector, and tourism all on board and all wanting to work together. There are 16 commitments in this document. They don't go into granular levels per se. They talk about operations, influence and leadership, transport and buildings. And the intention is that these organisations will make a commitment to decarbonise themselves by 2030 and help Edinburgh on its journey. But more than that, and as evidenced by the first meeting that we held last month, these organisations want to do projects together. They want to help collaborate and work together to try and make a difference. Now imagine if we could replicate that across the country, not only in Scotland, but across the UK, what a powerful impact we could have. I think we would be well on the road to net zero. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. You've set out there for us some of the key areas of focus from a sectoral perspective and those very significant opportunities that there is within Scotland. Importantly also, though, the need to move, I think, at pace to be able to achieve our ambitions, and critically, the need for collaboration, something that I think we'll pick up throughout. I would now like to turn to our second speaker. Our second speaker is John MacDonald. He's the CEO of APITO, the Global Skills Organisation for the Energy Industry. And in this role, John is focused on driving the international skills agenda for the energy sector and the development of a safe and skilled workforce through the delivery of global standards and high quality skills development, workforce solutions, and also by leading dialogue with industries and governments across the UK and Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, and the Americas. Most recently, John has led the organisation's move into the renewable energy sector, marked by the launch of a new suite of products designed to address the skills requirements of a net zero economy. John established and leads the Energy Skills Alliance, bringing together senior members of the UK and Scottish governments, the energy industry and industry bodies to create an integrated skills strategy for a net zero UK energy industry. So John, if I could hand over to you, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. So where are we? Well, gosh, we're fast approaching the first anniversary of this exhausting and tumultuous year, a year of living with daily uncertainty. And that one story, of course, that's dominated the last 12 months and united the world at the same time, the fight against COVID-19. So I know we'll all agree that the impact on families, individuals, communities and countries has been devastating. So too the impact on industry, from small businesses through to entire sectors. And the energy industry hasn't escaped this. As a result of this pandemic, I believe that organizations have had to re-examine strategies, introduce organizational change at pace in order to deal with this. So while it's entirely appropriate that we remember and focus on the nation caused by COVID, it's also important to recognize that over the past year, the world has shown remarkable resilience, and the energy industry is no different. So we've seen over that same period a significant acceleration in the journey towards net zero. So the industry, the sector, has been at the forefront of carbon reduction while ensuring that our energy supply remains safe, secure, and sustainable. Moving rapidly towards a more integrated energy system with net zero regarded as a huge opportunity rather than a perceived threat. And while technological innovation is playing a vital role, and we heard about that in the earlier session, it's our people who are front and centre, as they have been in all 4 industrial revolutions. All our previous energy transitions have depended on people, their creativity, imagination, and expertise. And it's people who will reshape our energy system. And the good news is that the UK is in pole position here. We have half a century as leaders and pioneers. Back in the 70s, we developed frontier technologies to remove oil and gas from the world's most hostile environments. This year, for my organisation, marks Apito's 50th anniversary of supporting safety, skills, and transformation for the industry, working side by side by that industry and that workforce to ensure a safe and competent workforce. So the energy industry has delivered unrivaled feats of engineering together with a supply chain that is unmatched. And that legacy, I believe, gives us incredible competitive advantage today. It's because of the world-leading expertise, technological innovation, and adaptable infrastructure that Scotland is already a world leader in offshore wind. And we have a genuinely exciting opportunity to lead the world in clean energy. Today, I want to look at the human factors that will be crucial in turning our ambition into reality. And I want to look at 3 clear steps we must take together. Firstly, creating the right platform for clean energy skills, jobs, and careers. Secondly, making the transferability of skills across the energy sector a reality at all levels. And then thirdly, acting now to deliver the future we want. No time to stand still. So firstly then, creating that right platform. I think if we want to realise the best version of our possible futures, to have the workforce that will guarantee our success, then we need far-sighted skills strategies that are based on the needs of tomorrow and not of today or yesterday. And if we keep doing the same thing, then we shouldn't be surprised when we get the same results. So we do need to deliver change. And creating that platform means building an education system that's fit for purpose. It means much closer collaboration between industry and education and training, new programs and courses for the tech-enabled future. It means upskilling and reskilling the workforce, and it means embracing change. It's critical that we look at the whole picture. In the lower carbon economy of the 21st century, there's no place for a 19th century system of education and training that equates success with passing exams and places less emphasis on vocational relevance and societal need. So we need to understand demand to nurture the vital jobs, skills, and capabilities of tomorrow. So what do I mean? Well, I mean data scientists as well as geologists, robotics managers as well as helicopter pilots. We must take action at every stage of the energy career journey to map the most clear and effective.
Hi there. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost John just at the moment. Can we give it just a little 30 seconds to see if there's any connection? And if not, I think we will move on to our third speaker. Oh, we've got John back. Fantastic. Thank you. John.
Okay. So can we, I'm not sure where we got to before you lost me. So let me just kind of slide in back to the notes of the previous speaker mentioned about collaboration. And I would agree with that. It's the key to success. And that's why Apito established the Energy Skills Alliance to enable a single conversation on how we work together in training and developing our people to make net zero a reality. And that's Energy Skills Alliance's single purpose, to deliver an all-energy career proposition. It's helping to prepare the energy industry for transition working with our partners in renewables and other sectors, including nuclear, National Grid, and with like-minded forward-thinking colleagues across broader industry, unions, government, SDS, and academia. There's a place for everyone who wants to be part of the solution and help shape the skills platform for the future. At the very heart of this, and this is so important, is the workforce. And we need to listen to them and work with them to deliver that change. So this drive to create change will be underpinned by an ambitious new piece of fundamental research that will enable us to navigate the clearest course through the transition. So the future energy skills demand and supply workstream is designed to do exactly what it says in the box. And that's led by Claire Mack, Chief Executive of Scottish Renewables, supported by Oxford Economics. And that's going to provide the big picture for us then, the go-to single source of robust employment and skills data that will support our future talent pipeline. Now, we've all heard about what gets measured gets managed. This model will identify the skills gaps and highlight the opportunities in our drive towards net zero. So that expertise and investment are targeted effectively. It will complement the Scottish Government's Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan and the UK Government's Green Jobs Task Force. We have to have a holistic approach going forward, don't we? That means sharing knowledge and expertise right across the energy industry, breaking down barriers between sectors, and it also requires knowledge and competence transfer between industries, so a whole system approach. Now, supporting that transferability of skills, every great transformation has an element of risk and encounters resistance. However, our drive towards net zero is non-negotiable. It's also vital that it's a just transition as well. 80% of oil and gas workers have a positive attitude about retraining to join the broader energy industry. And to deliver a just transition, we must help the energy workforce to adapt by reskilling and retraining for the future. It's hugely important. And this prolific growth will require a significant number of skilled employees. So according to a recent Rystad Energy report, demand for offshore wind staff will triple by the end of the decade, surging to 868,000 full-time jobs. In fact, it's anticipated that the hiring spree will already be visible in the middle of the decade, as jobs demand could reach about 589,000 in 2025. And in Europe, more broadly, we could also expect to see demand for jobs more than triple there as well. So we need to move at pace in terms of supporting skills demand from the perspective of employers as well as employees. So while there's already a skilled workforce in the renewables sector, it's important that we consider the skills of the oil and gas sector and what they can offer the transition to net zero. We share many skill sets and have essential offshore knowledge, including construction, project management, operations and maintenance, with decades of experience here. From a PETO's perspective, we've seen a rapid growth in demand for support to enable that transition. And we've launched a dedicated transition standard to address this urgent need and also introduced a range of renewable standards to create flexibility. Looking ahead, all energy career pathways at all levels are also key. And I want to just mention we have an innovation that's been developed at the moment called All Energy Apprenticeship Pathway, a multidiscipline apprenticeship which will cover key future job roles in the broader energy sector. It will give apprentices the skill sets that they in the industry need to thrive in a post-carbon era. And we're working with industry to test pilot this scheme next year. The third step, moving at pace, COP26 takes place in Glasgow in November with a simple but vital aim, uniting the world to tackle climate change. It brings a new sense of urgency, an acceleration in pace, and a focus for action. And the energy sector should be proud that our people are on the front line in the journey to net zero. The talented and enthusiastic workforce is one of our greatest assets. So we must continue to inspire and excite young people to become the next generation of energy workers. So the My Energy Future programme, the third strand of work within Energy Skills Alliance, seeks to do just that. It will launch in spring this year, and it's a dynamic online platform and digital campaign. It will signpost a range of practical and engaging information supported by a community of real-life energy influencers. We'll provide a positive learning environment designed to inspire and engage young people and bring the future of energy to life for the next generation. We must modernise our vocational education and qualifications and training, and we're doing that with the creation of these apprenticeships. All of this creates questions about where investment comes from. Is it employers, governments, or both? My own view is that we need an approach that includes government, industry, the workforce, education, and training. And I believe that in the journey to net zero, we have found common ground and a shared purpose. I'm convinced that we'll succeed in our endeavour through industry, government, academia, and unions pulling together. And we know that by working together, we can create effective and enduring results that will give our people the skills and capabilities that will deliver a just transition to a net zero future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. That's been very helpful there, setting out again how much people are important in this, in reshaping the energy system, highlighting the world-leading expertise that we have in Scotland, and the need, I think, to create the right platforms to allow us for people to be able to transfer within industries to be able to uptake the opportunities that we know are actually coming on stream. Again, very important around collaboration, a theme coming through everyone's presentations, and the need to act now. This is not for tomorrow. This is something that we really need to be picking up and dealing with from now onwards. So I'd like to turn now to our third and final speaker, Paul Sheeran. Paul is the Chief Executive of Scottish Engineering, and Paul joined Scottish Engineering in March 2018, having previously held the role of Managing Director for B&W Diamond Power Speciality Limited. Originally from Thurso in the north of Scotland, Paul studied electrical and electronic engineering at the University of Glasgow and joined Nuclear Electric in 1990 as part of the Sizewell B project team. After a period of working based in the USA, he returned to Scotland and joined Polaroid at its Dumbarton base in 1996, became Managing Director from 2005 until March 2017. Paul has been a keen volunteer and supporter of Young Enterprise Scotland, acting as the school's business advisor and Dumbartonshire area team chair, and enjoys opportunities to promote enterprise, engineering and manufacturing within schools. So Paul, if you would like to give us your presentation now, thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Andrea. So yeah, thanks a lot also for the chance to come and talk about people being at the heart of the energy transition. So my slides are just coming up, which is great. So I want to take us through a few of what have been the increasing conversations around the energy transition skills impact in the last year. So let's start with, I suppose, the most common question. You trying to click on? So this has been the most sort of increasing question that I've been having with industry and others in the last year. What are green skills? I think it's a really interesting one because, in essence, by answering it, we can get ourselves the answer, which is what do we need to do to be ready for where we are now and where we're going to be over the next foreseeable future. I think you've heard from other speakers, it's also a really key question for Scotland in terms of the opportunity to transition from the areas of industry we have just now, which are carbon intensive, that we will need to move to decarbonised industry in the future. And so, that presents two things. It presents an opportunity to reskill the skills we've got, but it also gives a question at how do we build into the education that we have from early years through college and university and beyond. So I went to look and have a kind of to see where other people were answering this, and clearly other people are wrestling with the same question. It's not an easy one. This one caught my eye. I read it recently, the London School of Economics blog from 2018. Now, the conclusions were based on data from the US. I guess that was what was available and strongest for them. But it stated, rather than try and go around the, a sort of guess at what green skills are, it said, well, let's state some facts about what we see it is in the evidence that's there already. So they took these things away: growing faster than total employment. So they compared it against other employment areas. They saw that green jobs are highly skilled jobs. I think we could all agree with that. They saw that it demanded an average wage premium of 4%, so fits in with the highly skilled, but even at that, a bit up from there. And this one really interested me. Green jobs cluster in particular areas, significantly higher than similar characteristic occupations. So they saw evidence in the data that they reviewed that the cluster effect and the collaboration to go where you need to go in net zero industry and operations, pulled this together. So, I think what you can see from that is it's not really answering what are the green skills question yet. So I think there's a piece to go on to, and for that I'm going to talk a little bit about something that Andrea mentioned at the very start of our introduction. So this is the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan, which is, I think an excellent piece of work that was pulled together very rapidly, but also very thoroughly by Skills Development Scotland at the end of 2020. Now, Andrea pointed out that there are 6 key takeaways. I must have run out of fingers because when I read it and went through it in detail, I had 3 things that really stood out for me from the document and what stood within it. And I suppose before I do that, we had the opportunity to give some input to that at the time that Skills Development Scotland were pulling it together. And so I had a lot of conversations with industry about this question, including those that are in the areas where they are technically in the green economy and green skills already. And what I took from that was things like, well, the gearbox and generator for a wind turbine is still just a gearbox and a generator. Hydrogen fuel cells are, at the very heart of them, a very high pressure gas system which has valves and instrumentation, pipe work, and other ancillaries, and it's an integrated system. It will have digital connectivity for its controls and instrumentation. And you could go on examples from that, but there's a temptation from that to say, well, there's nothing really new under the sun in that respect. So what is it? And this is where I think the document does really well. My takeaways from that is, well, understanding the importance and principle of decarbonisation is really important, because you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing, why you're doing it differently from what you've done until now. And I think that's something that has to be throughout the organisation. I think that was the first principle that I took away. I also saw that digital skills are an enabler of the circular approach, and circular approaches are absolutely key to everything we do from a clean technology or decarbonisation. And then this really interesting one, meta skills needed to go quickly, efficiently and effectively. And so these are the meta skills, particularly of adaptability, of the way to see how you get the same result but more efficiently, and get there as safely and with the same quality, but get there faster. And that raised another question for me, which is why is that so important? What are these meta skills at the heart so important? The best answer I heard on that was that if you look at clean technology projects, they are more likely than ever to be investment backed, not funded from the balance sheet, which lots of previous energy projects have been. And with investment backing comes a different set of clear criteria, clear benchmarks for the return on investment, for the cost efficiency, for the continuous improvement principles that are built into it. And that leads to that. How do you do that? How do you go quickly? How do you go efficiently? How do you go effectively? But at the same time, 100% compliance on a safe project and a safe system at the end of it, and 100% quality at the heart of everything for sustainability and reliability, which is key. So that's interesting. So you've got that first start, which is, okay, hands-on skills, whether that's hands-on on a keyboard or hands-on, on a piece of equipment, at the heart of them, there's not really anything new under the sun. You've got this filter of, but there are these other things which are really important. But you can hold them up again and say, well, hang on a minute, which industry, which sector wouldn't want those? I mean, given where we're going is our future, and the benefit to business of circular principles, who wouldn't want their staff to understand the principles and importance of decarbonisation? Name me a sector that doesn't say that digital skills are at the forefront or is most important of what they see for their future growth and sustainability. And also, who wouldn't want to have meta skills, those flexibility, adaptability, the ability to think differently quickly and move on? My conclusion from that is absolutely, ask ourselves and keep asking ourselves, what are green skills? But green skills are STEM skills, the very same skills that industry needs, wherever it is and whatever part it is. And I think some of the themes from today are, it will be just woven into everything we do in every sector and every industry if we get to the targets that we've got. So that was my conclusion coming from that, and I think a really useful output coming from the CSAP work. So, next question then, ask ourselves is, what do we collectively need to do to do about that, to meet that challenge? And at this point, if there's anybody out there who's had the misfortune of hearing me speak on skills before, you're going to hear some of the similar things that you've heard from me before. So I'm going to start with, I think, one of the challenges across the UK. So this chart, I think, was from the start of last year, the ONS's projection on population growth in over 16-year-olds. And you can see the gold there is the projected growth in over 65s, and the blue is the projected growth in the 16 to 65. And anybody who's in the industry and the engineering manufacturing knows that whereas our population centre at somewhere in the 52, 53-year-old position, so not healthy from where you'd like your spread of age distribution to be. Add to that, and this one a bit more up to date, sometimes people have talked about this as being the Christmas tree distribution of age in Scotland, and you can see that from the shape. And unfortunately for us, and this was taken from a few days ago, where we are, or this one was, I centred it on 2019. So we are at age 16, we're at the thinnest waist of the tree. And so what do you take from that? Well, we need to replace the people who will leave our industry because of our ageing profile in the country. And we're going to have to attract them harder than ever to bring them in, because there are low numbers of 16, 17-year-olds that we have to attract into our industry in numbers that we probably haven't done before. And I think there's a consideration against that, which is, when you look at the activities that we have to deliver to get to those targets, whether that be 2050, 2045, or in Scotland 2035 for the decarbonisation of rail passenger services, there is a lot to do. We will need lots of people in this industry to get us to where we need to be. And so we are going to have to pull them forward and make sure we're replenishing our talent pipeline of STEM skills. And we need to do it quickly. And so in that respect, a last challenge, and this is a challenge coming directly from coronavirus. So here's a little snapshot of SDS's figures on engineering modern apprenticeships in the last year, or the year particularly April to January, year on year. And you can see there that we have lost a year of 50% of the essential skills that we need come in. And so based on all of those things, ageing profile, low number of 17-year-olds in Scotland, and unfortunately where we are just now, because of the fact that, frankly, industry, certainly in engineering, the ones I talk to, an awful lot of them are on their knees with the impact of the economic impact of coronavirus. We need to look after the numbers. And if you tie that back to STEM skills, our green skills, if we're doing them in the right way, then we have to watch out for these numbers first and foremost. and make sure that that goes forward. I'm sure there's going to be a question about whose responsibility is that. Well, simply it's everybody's responsibility. It certainly is something that Scottish Government care a lot about and have an eye on, and their agencies. It's also a key front and centre for industry. It's an absolute must for education. And how do you get there? Well, the same word that you've heard many times before: collaboration. Can I add one last thing to that, which is, despite that, and you can take from all of that a bit of doom and gloom, but there's another part in this, which is there's a huge opportunity. We in the industry have talked for a long time about how we change the impression, how we change the perception of a role in manufacturing engineering. Seem to be old-fashioned. With a lot of the work that we're going to have to deliver, going forward, they're going to have green jobs, green skills, action for climate emergency, with them, and that presents a huge opportunity to make sure that our industry is attractive for the people that we need to attract into. And at that, I'll close.
Thank you very much, Paul. So our speakers have taken us on quite a journey through the opportunities that we need to be able to respond to in Scotland, on the evidence base that we need to be able to understand in terms of future skills demands, on the sorts of things that we might need to do to be able to get people prepared to uptake those opportunities, and indeed the key players that we have to get involved to be able to deliver on that successfully. So following on from that excellent set of presentations, I'd like to start the question and answer by asking you to take part in a couple of polls. And you'll be well practiced at this by now, as you've had opportunity to do this in prior sessions. So the first of those will give you an opportunity and a kind of starting point for our discussion. So if we could maybe bring that first poll up. And the question that we would like to pose to you is, how important do you consider the development of appropriate skills to be to the achievement of our net zero target? So thinking back on the various things that our presenters have actually put to you, the challenges that they've set out, how important do you think that development of appropriate skills actually is? Okay, well, we're certainly beginning to get a sense of what people think. Very important or important. Certainly making that point, I think, that it isn't just about technology, it's about people and skills being very much at the heart of what we do. And I think we'll come back to that a little bit more detail with some of the questions in just a moment. Okay, could we also then bring up the second of these polls, which is asking you a question around whose job do you think it is to ensure that Scotland has the right skills in place to enable the rollout of renewable energy projects that we need to meet that net zero by 2045. So is this the role of government? Is this the role of the UK government? Do private training providers have a hand in there? What about employees themselves? Is it about skills provision? Further education, higher education institutions? Is it industry, or is it someone else entirely? So where do we actually think that responsibility actually lies? And I suppose it's interesting as well because, skills is a derived demand, with the skills needs flowing from job opportunities that actually come on stream. The skills system doesn't traditionally train for stock, but I'll be very interested in seeing your thoughts. And we'll pick that up with the panel in just a moment. Okay, so we've got Scottish Government up there on sort of 55, more than half of you thinking that is the key player in relation to all of that. Okay, what we'll do is I'm going to ask the panel, I think now, for their reflections on some of the things that we're actually looking at. So we'll move on from that poll and welcome the panel back. Welcome, Claire, John, Paul. And first of all, I think I'd like to delve down a little bit more around the sort of skills elements in terms of the importance of skills. So, delegates were clear that skills were important, or very, very important in relation to achieving the net zero target. But thinking about that in a little bit more detail, drawing on your own experience, I'm interested in what you think the specific skill sets are that are going to be most in demand to deliver on that net zero, and how soon should we be looking at bringing those skill sets on board? Maybe Claire, perhaps I'd come to you first of all. I mean, what's your thinking around that?
I guess in answering that question, I'd probably draw on the information that's in the 10-point plan, in the BEIS White Paper, and what Scottish Government came out and said in December as well, because that is your route map in terms of how we're going to get to net zero. And so whilst we talk about CCUS and hydrogen, they're not where offshore wind and onshore wind are at the moment. The immediacy of the offshore wind sector in terms of round 4 having just been announced, and fingers crossed Scotland will be announced later this year, mean that we know that there's going to be activity in certain of the energy sectors or subsectors now. But the other thing to bear in mind, when you look at what Boris said back in November, he talked about 60,000 jobs in offshore wind, but he also talked about 50,000 jobs in greener buildings. And that's in the context of 600,000 heat pumps being installed by 2028. Think about that in terms of the numbers and the deployment rate that you need and the number of personnel, whether it be engineers, installation personnel that need to go into build try and affect some of this. Now that's heat, but we've got the bigger issue of getting rid of the gas central heating that's in everybody's houses at the moment, and the targets for those are hugely ambitious. So I come back to the point about this isn't just about putting turbines on the ground, it's actually coming into the buildings where people work, the hospitals where people are being treated, universities where people are being educated, and the homes where people.
Thank you. So huge opportunities right across a number of sectors to be able to actually pick up on what we need to do. Paul, I'm going to come to you next. I mean, you spoke quite a lot about the need for meta skills as well as some of those technical skills, but do you want to explore that in a little bit more detail, perhaps, in thinking about what are those skill sets that we need and how soon do we need to bring them on board?
Okay, I suppose the answer how soon, they're the kind of skills that any employer would look for right now, whether they're considering the green jobs question or not. I think that the point I was trying to kind of get across there is they become more critical for clean technology operations. I think they've become that because in everything, to take the example that Claire was talking about. So people who've recently installed gas boilers who realise that's not something that they can stay with, and it has to be upgraded to something that meets our targets for net zero. They are not going to be in a rush to do that if it's super expensive, and so sort of the levers of getting people to do that mean that it has to be done really efficiently, really effectively, and there has to be some really agile thinking in how you do that meets that. And that's the same for everything. I gave the example rail decarbonisation. That's expensive. If we want to do it and want to hit 2035, we have to come up with really innovative ways, and to do that, you need a set of agile, effective skills, and these are the meta skills. They're not the hands-on skills that are there, and maybe the proportions of them will need to change because we'll need more of this and more of that. But the hands-on skills, whether again that's keyboard or equipment, exist. So we have to look at the profile of whether we have enough of this one or that. But we absolutely need everybody, and I suppose this is probably one of your bigger asks that goes back to education, is that kind of meta skill. That's what we need people leaving our school systems with.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, you spoke very eloquently about the need for understanding the evidence, having a good evidence base to understand our future skills. So from that perspective, I mean, what do you think the evidence base is going to show us that are the skills we need most in demand? Oh, we got John there? No, perhaps we've lost John's connection again. That's fine. Maybe we could just bring up then that second poll result again, just so folks can actually see where that sort of responsibility lay. And then we can have a little bit of a discussion around whose job is it to ensure that Scotland has the right skills in place. So it's not entirely clear cut, but we've got a majority, 53% suggesting Scottish Government, but also clearly a role in there for industry, colleges, employees as well. So maybe if I could come to the panel, Claire, maybe come back to you on that. Does that surprise you? You talked a lot about the need for collaboration around being able to deliver the opportunities and then also the skills that we need. Is that a surprise to you, what you're seeing from the poll from our delegates?
Not at all. I think the role of government in this is absolutely critical. They have to set the direction of travel. It's from that policy direction of travel that people take confidence in terms of investment, in terms of knowing that they're putting the right effort and money in the right areas of concentration. But the bit that worries me at the moment is the disconnect. I always, as a transactional lawyer, bang the drum about from pipeline to projects. It's one thing talking about policy, but we need to implement it, and we don't have time to wait. So we need to get the right people in the right room at the right level, making the right decisions. So we can't talk about this forever. We need to actually take action now. But certainly, I think in terms of key stakeholders, government has to be at the heart of this, and then industry and tertiary education are the ones that come in and say, yep, that's what you need, that's what we'll deliver.
Thank you, Claire. I mean, Paul, just picking up, obviously, your experience within your sector, that engagement of the voice of industry and being able to identify and move forward skills demands and support the kind of work-based approach. Surprises, perhaps, from the poll that industry is not seen to have a stronger role?
Yeah, I mean, so I would have maybe redrawn them. I could have seen in my own chart, I could have seen Scottish Government at the top, because I think you have to lead from the front, and I think policy does that. So getting policy right and leading on it. Maybe the one that I would have had in there that I think is super important is education, and by that I mean early years, primary and secondary. And I think, again, come back to Claire's example. You can replicate all the things that we need to do to get where we want to get. There is an awful lot of things that are going to need to be installed. So the value of work-based learning, of apprenticeships, becomes even higher. And we need schools to put that front and centre as an absolutely excellent career path for young people. Because we are going to need that. We will not get where we want to get without that balance of skills.
Thank you. John, glad to have you back. Thank you. Unfortunately, we lost you in there. So I mean, I think one of the things I was saying was that you'd spoken very eloquently around the need to have a strong evidence base in order to understand, where the skill sets are going to be needed in relation to being able to transfer people to where they actually need to be. I mean, what do you see as those big skill sets that you think will be in demand in the future?
Well, a range of things, really. And maybe, first of all, might I kind of shout out for someone that can deal with rural broadband issues, as I've been having to deal with today. But this is a really important matter. And, I talked about Energy Skills Alliance, this group of government and people who are bringing together, that includes SDS and that. And I should say that I think Scottish...
Unfortunately, I think we're experiencing some more of those broadband issues.
Okay.
Sorry, John. I think we keep losing you. So,
Okay.
Nick, maybe I could ask: are there time for perhaps a question from our delegates at all? Have you been following to see where the sort of meat of the questions are coming from the floor? And if so, could you share any of those with us, Nick?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Andrea. Hi, panel. Absolutely. The questions that's near the top of the list here is about the challenges that people are facing coming across from oil and gas, specifically into renewables. And probably for Paul, I think a question, he talked about gearboxes just being gearboxes. What's the difference? And John obviously is a new entrant to the sector and training for renewables if he's around. But Craig McCafferty asks, how can Scotland's wealth of oil and petrochemicals industry people transition into renewable employment when employers are demanding 5+ years of prior renewable experience? Surely this isn't sustainable. So just a reflection on that, please.
So you
Claire,
want
I
me
don't
to
know.
go first?
Paul, go on.
Sorry,
On you go, please. Thank you.
So I would say that what we have there is the absolute bulk of the core skills that we need. I think that the high value manufacturing, the installation skills, the maintenance skills, The fact that there is technology, instrumentation, a digital element in what we do is an excellent springboard from oil and gas skills to clean technology skills. So I think that's where we are. I think it is that, when you look then at what the reskilling opportunity becomes, it's those bits, if they're needed, to understand the importance of how it all fits together, the principles of decarbonisation and why climate emergency is so important. I think you have to get them then to get under the skin of the projects and understand why they're structured the way they are and why they have to be done. But if you look back at some of the other things I said, quality at the heart so that it's sustainable and reliable and safe, because a lot of our things are in a marine environment and that brings its own hazards. Those are absolutely transferable and really essential to have. So I think it's an excellent starting point, and we just need to get the reskilling bit right so that people can do that.
Claire, is there anything you would like to add to what Paul has said there?
I think that pretty much covers it from my perspective. I think the one observation I would make, though, and maybe I'm feeling this more acutely just because of the age of my children, we've got an entire generation of 16 and 17-year-olds at the moment who are petrified because their exams have been cancelled. They've no idea how universities are going to react. They're worrying about the future. And I think government should be taking the lead from that in terms of amplifying that there is a future. There's a really bright future. It's a sustainable future. It's a green future, and they need to be part of it. And that's not coming across at the moment, because I think people are worrying about how are universities going to analyse my results, because the results aren't really going to be what I think they're going to be, because I'm not sitting the exams anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Nick, can I just check with you, not the only one having IT problems, as to how much longer we've got in the session? I think we're just about due to wrap up. Is that correct?
That's right, Andrew. You're just a minute over. Yeah, so
just a minute over. So fantastic presentations that we've had there. Some really, really interesting discussion, broadening our thinking about why people really sit at the heart of that kind of transition. There's no doubt about the scale of the opportunity that the transition to net zero is bringing, but also the scale of the challenge, I think. Transition to net zero is going to have transformational impact on the Scottish economy and the potential to create tens of thousands of well-paid, skilled jobs over the next 20 years, but it's going to be a disruptor. And I think seizing this opportunity, as we've heard through many of the sessions, is about requiring concerted and coordinated action. And yes, it's going to be government, but it's also industry, it's education, it's funding agencies, it's schools, it's right back through that whole pipeline. We know that predicting the future is going to be challenging, but we need to have that strong evidence base that John spoke about, where we'll understand the skills demand that we need. And I think critically, the transition to net zero is going to be about requiring a longer term commitment from all of us within the skills system, but a pressing need to act now. So I'm sure that you'll join me in thanking the speakers for their excellent presentations. And I'd also like to thank you for your participation. It's been a really, really good session. And I think now's the time to remind you that people are at the heart of the energy transition, driving that evolution of Scotland's energy systems. But two things that I would like to draw to your attention. Firstly, next week from the 1st to the 5th of March is Scottish Apprenticeship Week 2021, which is a time to share the value of those apprenticeships that Paul spoke of and that John spoke of, bringing individuals and employers into the economy. Secondly, Scottish Renewables are getting ready to open this year's Young Professionals Green Energy Awards for nominations. And this is a very exciting campaign, which is aiming to recognise the contribution of young professionals working in the renewable energy sector. And by young, we mean having worked in the industry for 5 years or fewer. So the categories include an apprentice award, an engineer award, an academic award, amongst others. And they are going to honour those who have a positive impact on business, communities, and on the renewables industry sector as a whole. So dates for your diary. Nominations will open on Thursday, the 11th of March, which is 2 weeks today. And your nominations can be made by visiting scottishrenewables.com/events. And those nominations are going to stay open until the 17th of May. So it's fast, it's free. You can even nominate yourself, and you can certainly think about nominating your wonderful colleagues. So I'd encourage you to start thinking about this now. So we've now reached a comfort break, and so you can go and get yourselves ready for the next session. We'd ask you to come back to the stage arena at 2:30 for the next session, which will be nature and how biodiversity is a crucial part of the toolkit. So hope you've enjoyed that session and look forward to enjoying the rest of the day. So thank you very much.